The Grand Hall of the Galactic Imperial Council buzzed with unusual tension. The massive crystal dome above reflected the light of 3 setting suns, casting purple and orange shadows across the worried faces of the council members. At the center of the round table, Admiral White's hologram flickered as he delivered his report. "My lords," the Admiral's voice trembled slightly. "Our deep space monitors have detected a new spacefaring species in Sector 7, Spiral Arm 3. They call themselves humans." Lord Green, the head counselor, leaned forward in his ornate chair. "Another primitive species discovering space travel. Why does this require an emergency session?" The Admiral pressed a button, and a holographic image of Earth appeared above the table. At first glance, they seem unremarkable. Their technology is crude by our standards. They haven't even colonized their entire solar system yet. Then why waste our time? Someone shouted from the back. "Because," the Admiral continued, "their rate of advancement is unlike anything we've ever seen." He displayed a timeline showing Earth's technological progress. They went from primitive flight to space travel in less than 70 years, from basic computers to artificial intelligence in less than 100. The council chamber grew quiet. Lord Green stroked his chin thoughtfully. "Impressive, but not threatening. We can simply add them to the Empire like all the others." That's when Officer Brown, a junior intelligence analyst, stepped forward. His hand shook as he held his datapad. "My lords, with respect, there's more." He looked at Admiral White, who nodded for him to continue. "I've been studying their history," Officer Brown said, his voice growing stronger. "In the last 200 years alone, they've fought 2 planet-wide wars. Their weapons advancement isn't driven by scientific curiosity. It's driven by conflict." He projected images of Earth's military history, tanks rolling across deserts, ships battling in vast oceans, aircraft carriers launching fighters, nuclear explosions lighting up remote islands. "They've developed weapons we never even considered," Brown continued. "While other species focused on energy weapons, humans created projectile weapons of incredible variety. They've weaponized their planet's resources in ways that—" He paused, swallowing hard, "in ways that show frightening creativity." Lord Green's face darkened. "Are you suggesting this primitive species could pose a threat to the Empire?" "My lords," Admiral White cut in, "what truly concerns us is their adaptability. Most species we encounter follow predictable patterns. Humans don't. They take others' ideas and improve them in unexpected ways. They turn everyday items into weapons. They fight in ways that defy standard military doctrine." The chamber erupted in murmurs. Lord Blue, the military commander, spoke up. "How many wars have they fought?" Officer Brown consulted his pad. "In their recorded history, thousands. They've fought over land, resources, beliefs, and sometimes—" He checked his data again. "Sometimes just to prove they could win." "Impossible." Lord Blue stood up. "No species survives that much conflict." "That's just it, sir," Brown replied. "The conflicts made them stronger. Each war pushed their technology forward. Their medical knowledge advanced because they needed to save their wounded. Their space program began as a military competition. Even their entertainment focuses on combat scenarios they call video games, training simulations available to their entire population." The council members looked at each other uneasily. Lord Green raised his hand for silence. "What do you suggest, Admiral?" Admiral White straightened his uniform. "Standard conquest protocols would be unwise. If we show aggression, their entire population could mobilize for war. They have no unified government, but history shows they put aside their differences when faced with external threats." "Are you saying we should leave them alone?" Lord Green asked incredulously. "I'm saying we should be very, very careful," the Admiral replied. "Most species we encounter want to join the Empire for protection. Humans have spent their entire history protecting themselves. They don't need us, and they might just be dangerous enough to prove it." The council chamber fell into uneasy silence. Outside, The last sunset, leaving the room in artificial light that seemed somehow colder than before. Lord Green stood slowly. We will need to discuss this further. For now, increase surveillance. We must learn more about these humans before deciding how to proceed. As the council members filed out, Officer Brown looked at his datapad one last time. The screen showed an Earth quote that made him shiver. We sleep safely in our beds because rough men stand ready to visit violence on those who would harm us. The Empire had encountered many species, but never one that spoke of war with such grim pride. Perhaps, Brown thought, this would require more than standard protocols. Perhaps this would require something the Empire had never done before. Caution. 6 months after the council meeting, Commander Black stood on the bridge of the Imperial flagship, Star Crusher, staring at the blue-green planet through the main view screen. The massive fleet of 300 ships hung in the darkness beyond Jupiter, their stealth systems making them invisible to primitive sensors. Or so they thought. Commander, the sensor officer's voice cracked. We're being scanned. Black spun around. Impossible. Our stealth technology is perfect. No primitive race code. Multiple scan types detected. The officer interrupted, his fingers flying over the controls. Radar, LiDAR, quantum detection arrays. They're using methods we've never seen before. On Earth, deep within the mountains of North America, General Thompson stared at the satellite data streaming across his screen. The alien fleet's stealth technology was good, but humanity had been looking for hidden things in space ever since they'd started launching satellites. How many ships? He asked calmly. 300 plus, sir. All bigger than anything we've got. Thompson nodded and pressed a red button on his desk. Within minutes, leaders from every major nation joined the secure video conference. They had practiced this scenario thousands of times. Ladies and gentlemen, Thompson began. First Contact Protocol Alpha is now active. They're trying to hide, which means they're not here for friendship. Back on the Star Crusher, Commander Black prepared to deliver the Empire's standard conquest speech. His ship's communication system detected thousands of primitive satellites, and he chose to broadcast on all frequencies. People of Earth, he began, his translation system converting his words to all Earth languages simultaneously. Your planet has been chosen to join the Galactic Empire. Resist, and we will destroy your major cities. Submit, and you will serve as loyal subjects. You have 1 Earth hour to. The transmission cut off. On his screen, a single human appeared. General Thompson sat at his desk, looking remarkably calm. This is Earth's United Defense Council, Thompson said. We've been watching your approach for the past week. Your ships are impressive, but we noticed some interesting vulnerabilities in your shield configurations. Black felt a chill run down his spine. How could they have gathered that much data through stealth shields? We have a counteroffer, Thompson continued. Leave peacefully, and we'll pretend this never happened. Stay, and you'll learn why no one has successfully invaded Earth in modern history. Black laughed, but there was a nervous edge to it. You think your primitive weapons can harm an Imperial fleet. We've conquered 1,000 worlds. And yet, Thompson smiled slightly. You've never conquered Earth. Look at your long-range scanners. You might find them interesting. Black gestured to his sensor officer, who gasped. Hundreds of small objects were appearing from behind Earth's moon. They had been hidden there, powered down, waiting. Impossible, Black whispered. You don't have this technology. We didn't, Thompson agreed. Until we reversed engineered it from the scout ship you lost near Mars last year. You really should be more careful where you leave your toys. The color drained from Black's face. The Empire had wondered what happened to that scout ship. You have 30 minutes to retreat, Thompson said. After that, we'll consider your presence an act of war. And Commander, his smile faded. We're very, very good at war. The transmission ended. Black stared at his officers, seeing his own shock reflected in their faces. The humans had not only detected them, but had prepared defenses and acquired Imperial technology. This wasn't in any of the conquest protocols. "Sir," his second-in-command asked, "your orders?" Black thought about the Council's warnings about humanity's history of warfare. He thought about how they had hidden their ships behind the moon, about how they had penetrated Imperial stealth technology. "Prepare for battle," he said finally, "but send word to the Empire. Tell them." He watched as more human ships appeared from behind Earth's other planets. "Tell them we may have underestimated these humans." As the fleet moved into attack formation, Black couldn't shake the feeling that the Empire had just made a terrible mistake. The humans weren't acting like a primitive species facing superior technology. They were acting like experienced warriors who had just caught someone in their trap. And for the first time in his career, Commander Black felt afraid. Commander Black's first target was obvious, an orbiting space station that appeared to be under construction. A perfect demonstration of Imperial power. "Target that primitive structure," he ordered, pointing at the half-built station. "One shot from our main cannon will show them our superiority." The Star Crusher's massive weapon powered up, its energy readings climbing higher. The beam lanced out across space, a brilliant purple streak against the darkness. It struck the station dead center, and the structure exploded in a spectacular display of light and debris. Black smiled. "Now let's contact them again and—" "Sir," his tactical officer shouted, "the debris, it's moving against physics." The supposedly destroyed station's fragments were indeed moving strangely. Instead of dispersing randomly, they were accelerating directly toward the Imperial fleet. As they watched in horror, each piece of debris revealed itself to be a small automated combat drone. "Evasive action." Black screamed, but it was too late. The drone slammed into the fleet's shields, not with simple kinetic force, but with precisely calibrated electromagnetic pulses that matched the shield's frequency. Dozens of Imperial ships went dark as their power systems overloaded. "They sacrificed an entire station just to get close to us," Black's second-in-command whispered in awe. That's when the real attack began. From Earth's surface, General Thompson watched the battle unfold. "Launch Phase 2, he ordered calmly. Across the planet, hidden silos opened. But instead of missiles, they launched thousands of small, sleek spacecraft. Each one was piloted by a veteran combat pilot who had trained for this moment for years. "Remember," Thompson's voice came through their comms, "you're faster and more maneuverable. They rely on energy weapons. Make them waste power, just like we practiced." The human fighters swarmed the Imperial fleet like angry bees. They flew in patterns that made no sense, defying standard combat doctrine. Each time, an Imperial gunner predicted their movement. They would do something completely unexpected. Back on the Star Crusher, Black watched in dismay as his fleet struggled. "Why aren't they following proper combat formations?" he demanded. "There's no logic to their attack patterns." "Sir," his tactical officer replied, "they're using something called dogfighting techniques. It's like they're treating space combat like atmospheric combat. It shouldn't work, but—" Another Imperial ship went dark as human fighters crippled its engines with precisely targeted shots. The humans weren't trying to destroy the ships. They were disabling them systematically. "Launch our fighters," Black commanded. Imperial combat ships poured from the carrier vessels, their pilots confident in their superior technology. But as they engaged the human fighters, something became terrifyingly clear. The humans were better pilots. They took risks no sane being would consider, pulled maneuvers that stressed their ships to the breaking point, and somehow survived. "How?" Black demanded as he watched another squadron of his best pilots retreat from what should have been an easy victory. "How are they doing this?" The answer came from his intelligence officer, who had been analyzing the combat data. "Sir, they're pilots. They train for this in simulators from childhood. They call them games. Their entire population practices combat scenarios for entertainment. These pilots have thousands of hours of combat practice before ever entering a real ship. a massive explosion rocked the Star Crusher. On the tactical display, Black watched in horror as more human ships emerged from hyperspace behind his fleet. They had somehow predicted exactly where the Imperial ships would be. "Sir," his second-in-command said quietly, "we've lost a third of the fleet. They're not destroying our ships. They're capturing them. They're learning our technology while we fight." Black stared at the tactical display, watching as his mighty fleet was systematically dismantled by what should have been an inferior force. The humans weren't just fighting. They were adapting, learning, improving their tactics with each passing moment. "Retreat," he ordered, his voice hoarse. "Full retreat. Send word to the Empire, the humans. They're not like the others. They don't just wage war, they live it. They breathe it. They turn it into a science." As the remaining Imperial ships flowed into hyperspace, General Thompson allowed himself a small smile. On his screen, he watched as recovery teams began collecting disabled Imperial vessels. "Begin reverse engineering immediately," he ordered. "The Empire just gave us exactly what we needed, a reason to show them what humanity can really do." In the debris field that was once a battle, human ships moved with purpose, collecting both victory and knowledge. The first battle was over, but the war was just beginning. In the Imperial War Room, Lord Blue slammed his fist on the table. 3 months had passed since the disaster at Earth, and the reports kept getting worse. "How?" he demanded. "How are they advancing so quickly?" The holographic display showed captured footage of the latest human warships. They were a terrifying blend of Imperial and Earth technology, combining the best of both worlds in ways the Empire's engineers had never considered. Admiral White pointed to one of the ships. "They're not just copying our technology. They're improving it. Look at their shield designs. They've somehow merged their primitive electronic warfare systems with our energy shields." "That's impossible," Lord Blue muttered. "It took us centuries to perfect shield technology." "They did it in 3 months," Admiral White replied grimly. "And that's not the worst part." The display changed to show human ground forces attacking an Imperial base on a frontier world. The soldiers weren't wearing the expected powered armor. Instead, they wore lightweight suits that seemed to bend light around them. "They took our stealth technology and made it portable," White explained. "But look closer at their weapons." The footage zoomed in. The human soldiers carried what looked like primitive projectile weapons, but when they fired, they released both bullets and energy pulses. "They merged their projectile weapons with our energy weapons," White continued. "Their bullets now carry a plasma charge. Our shields are designed to stop one or the other, not both simultaneously." Lord Blue sank into his chair. "How many troops have we lost?" 30% of engaged forces either dead or captured. Another 20% have deserted. White's voice was bitter. "They're terrified of the humans. There are stories spreading through the ranks." "What stories?" White pressed another button. Security footage from various battles played across the screen. Humans turning maintenance tools into weapons. Supply ships being converted into bombers mid-battle. Civilian vehicles armored with scavenged Imperial technology joining military formations. "They call it improvisation," White said. "Every human seems capable of turning anything into a weapon. Our troops never know what they're facing. Traditional combat doctrine is useless because the humans never fight the same way twice." A new officer burst into the room, his uniform disheveled. "My lords, the humans, they've breached the 7th defense line." "That's not possible." Lord Blue stood up. "That line is protected by our newest automated defense systems. The coding is unbreakable." "They didn't break the code." The officer was shaking. "They introduced something called a computer virus. The defense stations, they're firing on our own ships now." Admiral White's face went pale. "They turned our own weapons against us without even boarding them. Worse," the officer handed over a datapad. "They're broadcasting something across all our communication channels. They call it heavy metal music. Our troops, They can't stand the sound. Entire units are surrendering just to make it stop. Lord Blue stared at the battle reports in disbelief. The humans weren't just winning battles, they were rewriting the rules of warfare itself. Every Imperial technological advantage was being turned against them. "We need to sue for peace," Admiral White said quietly. "The Empire does not surrender." Lord Blue shouted. "The Empire has never faced humans before," White replied. "Look at these casualty reports. They're not just defeating us. They're studying us, learning our weaknesses. The longer we fight, the stronger they become." As if to emphasize his point, another alert blared. The display showed human ships emerging from hyperspace near a major Imperial shipyard. But something was wrong with their energy signatures. "By the stars," the young officer whispered. "They've modified their engines to match our hyperspace frequencies. Our early warning systems didn't detect them because they thought the ships were ours." Lord Blue watched as the humans launched their attack. Their ships moved in impossible patterns, their weapons fired in ways that defied Imperial combat doctrine, and their soldiers fought with a mixture of rigid discipline and chaotic creativity that no training could counter. "Send word to the Council," he said finally. Tell them we're not fighting a primitive species. We're fighting humanity, and they're teaching us what war really means." As the Empire's greatest shipyard fell to human forces, a terrible realization spread through the Imperial command. They hadn't started a war of conquest. They'd awakened a sleeping giant that was now showing the galaxy why peace had always been the better option. Deep within the towering spires of the Imperial capital city, the unthinkable was happening. Citizens were watching humans advance through their streets, not as conquerors, but as liberators. "They're not destroying anything," a young Imperial citizen whispered, watching from a window as human soldiers helped evacuate civilians from combat zones. The stories said they were savages. The human forces moved with practiced precision through the city. Instead of leveling buildings to clear paths, they used smaller teams to secure key points. Their weapons were set to stun, not kill. This wasn't the bloodbath the Imperial propaganda had promised. General Thompson walked through the secured sectors of the city, his armor dusty, but his expression calm. A local Imperial administrator approached him, trembling. Are you going to execute the government officials?" the administrator asked. Thompson shook his head. "We're not here to destroy your civilization. We're here to end a war your leaders started." He gestured to the human medical teams already setting up aid stations. "Your people will have the same rights as any Earth citizen." In orbit above the capital, the space battle told a different story. Here, humanity showed why they were feared. Imperial ships faced an enemy that had learned all their weaknesses and showed no mercy to those who continued fighting. "Another carrier group surrendered, sir," reported Thompson's tactical officer through the comm. "They're saying more will follow. The psychological warfare broadcasts are working." Those broadcasts were simple but devastating. The truth. Humans were transmitting unedited footage of Imperial citizens under Earth's protection prospering and living freely. The Empire's own people were choosing humanity's way. Back in the Imperial War Council, Lord Red watched the tactical displays with growing horror. "They're taking our worlds without destroying them. How? This defies all military logic." Admiral White, now openly supporting peace talks, explained. "They're using something from their history called hearts and minds. They're not just defeating our armies, they're winning over our people." "But our troops were supposed to be loyal to death," Lord Red protested. "That's the problem," White replied. "We taught our soldiers to die for the Empire. The humans taught their soldiers to think for themselves. And now our troops are thinking too." Reports flooded in from across Imperial space. Whole battalions were surrendering after seeing how humans treated their prisoners. Imperial citizens were rising up, not against their government, but against the war itself. On a frontier world, an Imperial commander watched in disbelief as his elite forces retreated from a human advance. "Stand and fight," he ordered through the comm. "Sir," his sergeant replied, "they're using our own ships against us, improved versions of our weapons, and tactics we've never seen. We've lost 3 platoons trying to hold this position. We're not dying for a lost cause." The human advance was unstoppable, but it wasn't through superior firepower. It was their adaptability, their creativity, and most surprisingly, their humanity that was winning the war. In the capital city, General Thompson met with a group of Imperial military officers who had chosen to negotiate. Their faces showed a mixture of fear and curiosity. "Why?" one Imperial officer asked. "Why show mercy when you could simply destroy us?" Thompson smiled. "Because that's not who we are. Humanity learned long ago that the hardest victory isn't defeating your enemy, it's turning them into allies." The officer looked confused. "But your weapons, your tactics, are for those who give us no choice," Thompson finished. "We perfect the art of war so we can better preserve peace. Look around you. Every world that accepted peace is thriving. Only those who keep fighting are falling." As if to emphasize his point, another report came in. 3 more Imperial fleets had surrendered after their crews saw footage of the capital city's peaceful transition. "Your empire taught superiority," Thompson continued. "We learned something different from our many wars: adaptation, innovation, and the importance of fighting only when necessary." The Imperial officers looked at each other, then at their city where humans and Imperial citizens were already working together to restore services. "Perhaps," the lead officer said slowly, "it's time we learned from humanity." Above them, the last Imperial warships in the sector powered down their weapons. The turning point wasn't just in the war. It was in how an entire civilization viewed conflict, peace, and the strange species that had mastered both. The Imperial Council chamber, once a symbol of absolute power, now felt more like a tomb. Emergency alarms blared throughout the capital as Lord Green read the latest reports with trembling hands. "Half of our core worlds have surrendered," he announced to the remaining council members. "Not to human forces, they're surrendering to the idea of human governance." The massive holographic display showed the Empire crumbling from within. Green dots represented worlds under human protection. Red showed those still fighting, and blue marked those requesting human peacekeepers. The green and blue dots vastly outnumbered the red. "Our own people are betraying us," Lord Red demanded. "No," Admiral White corrected. "Our people are choosing a better way. Look at the economic reports from worlds under human protection." The display shifted to show statistics. Worlds that had accepted human oversight were experiencing unprecedented prosperity. The humans weren't conquering. They were teaching, sharing, improving. "Their universities are accepting our students," a council member reported. "Their businesses are partnering with our merchants. They're offering citizenship to anyone who wants it." Lord Red slammed his fist on the table. "This defies all logic. Their military doctrine is superior. Their technology now exceeds ours. And instead of crushing us, they're helping us. That's why we're losing," Admiral White explained. "We prepared for conquerors. We got teachers instead. Look at their military bases." The display showed human military installations across former Imperial worlds. They weren't just fortresses, they were centers of learning. Imperial citizens trained alongside human soldiers, learning not just tactics, but ethics, leadership, and the human concept of civic duty. "Sir," a young officer burst into the chamber. "The Third Fleet. They're not just surrendering. They're requesting human training officers. They want to learn human military doctrine." Lord Green sank into his chair. The Empire's mighty military, once the galaxy's most feared force, was choosing to learn from their former enemies. "How many worlds are still loyal?" he asked quietly. "Loyal to the Empire? Less than 20%, the officer reported. But here's the strange part. The humans aren't demanding loyalty to Earth. They're teaching worlds to govern themselves." This was perhaps the most shocking revelation. The humans weren't building an empire. They were dismantling one and replacing it with something entirely new. In orbit above a frontier world, an Imperial captain watched as human engineers helped upgrade his ship's systems. His crew, instead of resisting, worked eagerly alongside them. "Your weapons are more advanced now," he said to the human engineer. "Why share your knowledge with us?" The engineer looked up from her work. "Because knowledge shouldn't be hoarded. Your people have good ideas too. We're learning from you as well." That's how humanity grew strong, by learning from everyone. Back in the council chamber, another crisis erupted. The Imperial Bank reported that worlds under human protection had begun trading in a new currency system, one based on actual production rather than imperial decree. "The economy is shifting," Lord Blue reported grimly. "Worlds are abandoning imperial credits for the human trading system. Our financial control is collapsing." Admiral White stood up. "We have two choices: continue fighting a war we've already lost, or what?" Lord Red challenged. "Or learn from the humans. Accept their help. Become something better than an empire." The chamber fell silent. Centuries of imperial doctrine said this was unthinkable, but the evidence was undeniable. Worlds that cooperated with humans were thriving. Those that resisted were collapsing. "They're not just defeating us militarily," Lord Green said quietly. "They're proving that everything we believed about power and control was wrong." As if to emphasize his point, another report arrived. The Imperial Military Academy's senior staff had formally requested human instructors to teach their new course: adaptive warfare and ethical combat. The Empire wasn't just losing a war, it was losing its very identity. And surprisingly, many of its citizens seemed relieved by this fact. "Send word to Earth," Lord Green finally ordered. Tell them the Imperial Council is ready to discuss terms, not just for peace, but for change." The empire that had ruled for 1,000 years was ending, but something new was rising to take its place, something that combined imperial knowledge with human innovation. The galaxy would never be the same. 5 years after the first contact between Earth and the Empire, the galaxy had transformed. The Grand Imperial Council chamber now hosted representatives from hundreds of worlds, including humans who sat as equals among their former enemies. General Thompson, now serving as Earth's diplomatic representative, stood before the gathered assembly. His combat armor had been replaced by formal diplomatic attire, though a small medal on his chest, showing both Imperial and Earth symbols, reminded everyone of the path that led here. "The last Imperial resistance group surrendered this morning," he announced. "The war is officially over." Instead of cheers, the chamber filled with thoughtful silence. Everyone remembered how this began, with an empire certain of victory in humans who turned war itself into an art form. On the massive screens surrounding the chamber, statistics told the story of the galaxy's transformation. Trade between worlds had tripled. Scientific advancement had accelerated beyond all predictions. The combined human imperial technology had opened new frontiers in space exploration. "We have received requests from 17 more species seeking membership in the Galactic Coalition," a former Imperial administrator reported. "They're particularly interested in the Human Education Program." The Human Education Program had become legendary. It didn't just teach technology or tactics. It taught creativity, adaptability, and ethical leadership. Former Imperial officers now trained alongside human instructors, learning not just how to fight, but when not to. Lord Green, who had helped negotiate the peace, addressed the assembly. 5 years ago, we thought humans were primitives to be conquered. Today, they've shown us a better way to rule, by not ruling at all." The screens showed images from across the galaxy. Former Imperial warships, now painted in coalition colors, patrolled trading routes alongside human vessels. Schools on once Imperial worlds taught both human and Imperial history. Civilians from hundreds of species worked together on massive engineering projects. But their military power remains unmatched, someone in the chamber noted. "Yes," Thompson replied, "because we remember the cost of not being prepared. But look how we use that power now. The displays shifted to show coalition rapid response forces, human and imperial ships working together to aid worlds hit by natural disasters, protect merchants from pirates, and defend the new peace they'd built. A young imperial officer stepped forward. The humans have a saying we now teach at the academy. The supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. And yet, Thompson added with a slight smile, we maintain enough strength that no one wants to test us in battle. Peace through strength, but peace above all. The assembly nodded. The humans had proven they could win any war, which made their dedication to peace all the more impressive. An alien diplomat raised her hand. What of the warning? The one the Empire now sends to all aggressive species. Lord Green touched a control, and a holographic message appeared. The same one now broadcast to any civilization that showed signs of military aggression. Beware the humans, not because they are cruel, but because they are kind. Not because they are weak, but because their strength is tempered by wisdom. Challenge them, and they will teach you war in ways you never imagined. Embrace them, and they will show you wonders beyond imagination. The choice is yours. Choose wisely. Thompson stood at the center of the chamber, looking at faces of hundreds of species, former enemies now working together for a better galaxy. We didn't start this war, he said quietly, but we ended it in a way no one expected, not with complete victory, but with complete transformation. The assembly rose as one. The new Galactic coalition wasn't perfect, but it was something unprecedented. An alliance of equals, bound together by shared knowledge and mutual respect. As the session ended, a young species representative approached Thompson. Is it true? She asked. Would humans really go to war again if necessary? Thompson looked out at the peaceful galaxy they'd built from the ashes of conflict. We're ready for war precisely because we value peace. That's the final lesson the Empire learned. True strength isn't about conquering others. It's about protecting what matters. Above the chamber, Earth and Imperial ships patrolled together. A reminder that the greatest victories don't always come from defeating an enemy. Sometimes they come from turning enemies into friends. The galaxy had learned its lesson. Never start a war with humans. They'll end it on their terms, and their terms will change everything.